The Nintendo Switch eShop hasn't been too great. The experience becomes sluggish, and it makes it harder for me to want to find new games. The further I dig, the worse it gets. I've been minutes deep into a search, looking for a game, when the system kinda just gave up and spat me back to the main screen. Ouch. Ironically, the best way to buy digital Nintendo Switch games is not on the Switch. The experience is far superior on the Nintendo website with a smart device or computer. Things were significantly smoother on the previous generation systems, with the Wii U and 3DS eShops. It might be easy to blame the performance issues on the use of an internet browser, or the Switch being a weak piece of hardware, but that's not the full picture. I have to wonder, how did its design end up this way? Nintendo Switch Online is another program that uses the internet browser and suffers from performance issues. The main draw for opening it, in my eyes, are the customizable icons. The Rewards tab is cleverly placed near the bottom. Hold down for too long, and you might end up near the membership prices. Leave it idle to load, and you'll start to see advertisements and news. Well, I don't think it's that cynical. The sluggish nature, intended or not, might make the user think longer about the ads. The Nintendo eShop, on the other hand, is a welcome place for adverts and transactions. It's a place where business is wanted, with thousands of games available. While scrolling through a search, more and more games will continuously load near the bottom of the page. None of the ones at the top entirely get fleshed out, so it gets a bit sluggish and harder to navigate the longer that it's used. These netfront browsers are part of a handful of applications using the Nintendo Switch's Applet system. Pop-ups for things like news, album, controllers, user profiles, Mii editor, the keyboard, amiibo, and more are all considered applets. All of these applets run without issues and are very snappy. Performance isn't a concern. One of the weird quirks about applets is that there can only be one summoned at a time. If I were to bring up the keyboard to name a course in Super Mario Maker 2, and back out to the home menu to check my album, the keyboard input would be destroyed, and my text would be gone. It isn't so bad, since I wasn't writing out an essay or anything, but many of the buttons on the home menu will destroy an applet running inside of a game. Some games use a browser applet to display online news, share offline info, or link to digital manuals. Virtua Racing has a Google Forums page for some reason. I got Virtua Racing because I wanted to support game preservation, but haven't played it yet and think the controls are awful. If I could choose one game to appear in future Sega Ages titles, which would it be? Mario Clock. Anyways, trouble starts to show the more invested a user becomes with an applet. Twitch, for Nintendo Switch, is reliant on the browser applet to display its content. In fact, there isn't actually a native application. The only program asset is a splash screen. The application summons a browser applet, which links to the TV version of Twitch. The UI is chunky and easy to read from a distance. One awkward thing about the Switch version is that chat isn't visible while watching a stream. Instead of playing side by side, the media player will take up the entire screen. This seems to be a purposeful limitation of the Switch WebKit to not embed video. It's a bit strange not having access to chat while a stream is open, but hey, it's kinda cool seeing the native media player supports live streams. There's one problem though. Say that I've been looking around the recommendations page and found a streamer that I've never heard of. Good stuff. Oh, hey, my friend is online. I wonder what he's playing. Oh, nice. Anyways, I returned back to Twitch, and the applet was destroyed. Whoever I found is now lost because Twitch relies entirely on the applet system. Twitch was discontinued and delisted within 2 years of launch. Twitch exemplifies some of the biggest issues with heavily relying on the browser. Given its reliance on the applet and generally awkward issues, It was an experiment at best. So, what's the deal? Applets like News and Album can run great, but anything browser-related falls apart. At first, I thought the poor performance had to do with the amount of memory allocated. 1 GB total is dedicated to the operating system, with around 470 megabytes of that being available to applets. This doesn't seem like a lot, but then I thought back to the Wii U. That system used a browser for its eShop, and it ran buttery smooth. Looking into it, the memory allocation on Wii U is nearly identical. 1 GB is dedicated to the OS, and about 470 megabytes is given to background processes. Yet, the Wii U performs better. That could partially be due to the different design of the eShop. At launch, the Switch eShop wasn't so bad, but there weren't as many games being loaded. As a user flicks through the different categories, the eShop attempts to load in a bunch of images all at once. Newer iterations added more categories and more listings, so trying to scroll down a few at a time will induce a ton of lag. The Wii U eShop had a page system, where a smaller, set number of games would be loaded onto a single page with much smaller resolution images. Shoving a bunch of higher quality images into a limited memory pool likely doesn't help the Switch. Another struggle point for Switch is the limited amount of CPU cores available while a game is open. While suspending, certain games remain active on the CPU. Usually, this happens when online services are active, so as not to end the connection. Sometimes, select offline games, such as Skyrim or Super Mario Sunshine, don't fully suspend and remain active on the CPU. In all these cases, the applet has 3 fewer cores to work with, degrading performance. That's actually why there's a notice with the Nintendo Switch Online applet, because it's struggling on its single core. There's also the omission of just-in-time compilation. As noted by a few researchers, the Nintendo Switch browser applet lacks JIT. JIT compilation is used in browsers to help speed up performance, but is also commonly abused to make exploits. Because of its omission, performance can be slower with certain JavaScript functions, and some may outright not function properly. While the Switch has more CPU grunt to force through websites, it isn't able to get past this Cloudflare challenge, which isn't an issue on Wii U. Back on the actual design. The UI of the eShop isn't truly asynchronous from the content being loaded. This means scrolling through the categories on the left is also tied to finishing loading content on the right, creating unresponsiveness and lag. If the left-hand UI were able to be used freely from the content being loaded on the right, it would help smooth out the user experience. At least a little bit. Currently, it's still stuck on the browser page. This wasn't a problem on Wii U, but also its browser-based eShop wasn't as dynamic. Each selection had to be purposeful. Only after confirming, new content would be loaded. On Nintendo Switch, loading content is tied to simple navigation of the D-pad without making any direct selection. This becomes problematic when trying to get to a specific category, since everything in between will try to load. One workaround would be using the touchscreen in handheld mode to skip categories and jump to the exact selection that's wanted. Visually, the Switch eShop shows more games faster than Wii U, which could be a better experience. The Wii U eShop only had a set number of listed games on any given page, with small game icons, whereas the Switch has continuous scrolling and high-resolution cover art in a grid format. So in essence, there are several different factors affecting performance. CPU resources can be limited, especially when an online game is suspended. There's a lack of specific features in the browser, like JIT compilation. When scrolling, the RAM pool is small and might have trouble managing the amount of images. And, most importantly, the input for the UI is tied to other content loading, making the user experience feel sluggish. The design of the Switch eShop is more modern, having a constant flow, and shows more games on screen than any previous digital game storefront from Nintendo. From a design perspective, it's an upgrade. This change in design philosophy even extends to the system itself. The Nintendo Switch browser was never intended for heavy use, so it made sense to cut exploit-inducing features like JIT compilation, even if there is a performance penalty. There isn't a dedicated internet browser button on the home menu, and for games that do summon the applet, there's a whitelist of available websites to visit. There is a workaround to open things up, but there aren't conveniences like bookmarks, tabs, or history that were standard features on Wii U. The Switch browser wasn't meant to be used for surfing the web. The Wii U was designed during a time when companies wanted to have the ultimate living room entertainment box. There was a greater focus on media, with apps like Miiverse and the internet browser being core features for the system. The Wii U internet browser was engineered with all sorts of extra features, including gyroscopic scrolling, watching a video on one screen while browsing on the other, and development tools with documentation. There was even an interest from developers that websites would be optimized for Wii U. The Nintendo Switch was cut and dry. It's a machine dedicated to playing video games, and does a good enough job at it. When it was released, smart devices were more common, and more people relied on a phone or tablet for videos or guides. The likely reason why Nintendo still stuck with a website for the eShop was ease of updates. In previous generations, the only native digital storefront was the 3DS eShop. Because it was a proper application, redesigns could only be pushed alongside a system update. On Switch, if Nintendo wants the eShop to be Mario Red or add more categories, it can be updated without any application download from the user. While it was fairly snappy at launch, the push for a more modern design and experience focused on instantly loading categories and endless scrolling, ironically, makes the navigation experience worse and feel more sluggish. It's a good thing there's an alternative way to browse for games instead of using the Switch, but I do prefer buying things on console. There's a silly little jingle that plays. What the heck is Sleer mode?